Welcome to Wednesday night Bible study at Southside Assembly of God. I'm Dr. David Finch. The pastor has asked me to fill in a bit for him while he's on sabbatical and has asked me to continue his series on the prophets of the Old Testament. Tonight I'd like to cover the prophecy of Obadiah. It's an amazing prophecy, an amazing man. Let's talk a little bit about this. Obadiah, who is he? There are about 13 Obadiahs in the Bible. So which of them, if any, is writing this prophecy? Well, I believe that this is the Obadiah of 1 Kings 18 that interacts with Elijah and is a steward in the house of Ahab and Jezebel. There are others that would place his prophecy much later after the exile or during the exile to Babylon, and place him as a contemporary of the prophet Jeremiah. Now Jeremiah, in his prophecy, in the 49th chapter, has a lot of similar language to the vision of Obadiah and his prophecy against Edom. And that has led many scholars to date Obadiah to that later period of time, around 580 BC. However, I think that the traditional view, that's some almost 3,000 years old, the rabbinical tradition as well as the tradition of Orthodox Christianity, places the prophecy in the hands of Obadiah, the steward in the house of Ahab. Now, we see Obadiah's appearance in Scripture in 1 Kings 18. And so I'll read that to you. Not that you can't read yourselves, but for the purposes of the class tonight, I'll read to you. After a long time, in the 3rd year, the word of the Lord came to Elijah. Go and present yourself to Ahab, and I will send rain on the land. So Elijah went to present himself to Ahab. Now, of course, this is the story of the staying of the rain by Elijah in judgment of Ahab and Jezebel's wickedness. And rain had not fallen on the land, and now going into 3 years. And God says, it's enough. I've got something in mind. So he sends Elijah to Ahab, who has been looking for him all over to kill him. And so that's sort of the setting here when we are introduced to the person Obadiah. So now the famine was severe in Samaria, and Ahab had summoned Obadiah, his palace administrator. Obadiah was a devout believer in the Lord. While Jezebel was killing off the Lord's prophets, Obadiah had taken 100 prophets and hidden them in 2 caves, 50 in each, and had supplied them with food and water. In fact, the name Obadiah is a theophoric name. In other words, it contains the name of God, Yah, and it means servant or slave of Jehovah. So in the 5th verse, Ahab said to Obadiah, go through the land and all the springs and valleys. Maybe we can find some grass to keep the horses and mules alive so that we will not have to kill any of our animals. So they divided the land they were to cover, Ahab going in one direction and Obadiah in another. As Obadiah was walking along, Elijah met him. Obadiah recognized him, bowed down to the ground, and said, is it really you, my lord Elijah? Yes, he replied. Go tell your master Elijah is here. What have I done wrong? Asked Obadiah, that you're handing your servant over to Ahab to be put to death. As surely as the Lord your God lives, there's not a nation or kingdom where my master has not sent someone to look for you. And whenever a nation or kingdom claimed you were not there, he made them swear that they couldn't find you. But now you tell me to go to my master and say, Elijah is here? I don't know where the Spirit of the Lord may carry you when I leave you. If I go and tell Ahab and then he doesn't find you, he'll kill me. Yet I, your servant, have worshipped the Lord since my youth. Haven't you heard, my Lord, what I did while Jezebel was killing the prophets of the Lord? I hid 100 of the Lord's prophets in 2 caves, 50 in each, and supplied them with food and water. And now you tell me to go to my master and say, Elijah is here? He'll kill me. And Elijah said, as the Lord Almighty lives, whom I serve, I will surely present myself to Ahab today. And of course, what follows is the story of Elijah confronting the 450 prophets of Baal and 400 prophets of Asherah on Mount Carmel, and fire coming down and consuming Elijah's sacrifice. And so this is where we see that the introduction of Obadiah, the prophet. Obadiah, in the rabbinical tradition, was himself an Edomite. And his prophecy is against the nation of Edom. So who are the Edomites, and where did they come from, and why is there animosity toward Edom by the prophet? Well, the backstory here is, of course, that there were two brothers, Jacob and Esau. And Esau was the older, Jacob was the younger. However, the prophecy was that the older would serve the younger. And we know the story about the birthright of Esau ending up in the hands of Jacob and the animosity between the two brothers. Well, that animosity continued in the nations that came forth. Jacob became Israel, and Esau became Edom. Now, Edom itself is the word red. It's the same four letters as the word Adam, as in the first man. In Hebrew, there are no vowels, just consonants, and the same three letters, Aleph, Dalet, Mem. The three letters are the same for Adam and Edom. But Adam means earth, it means blood, it means a lot of things in Hebrew. Words do multiple duties in Hebrew. There are very few words in the Hebrew language, and many of the same words are used to mean different things depending on context. With Edom, it means red, and we're told in Scripture that Esau himself was a red-skinned and hairy man, much different from his fraternal twin brother, Jacob. And we know about the animosity between them and the tensions when they met again years after their separation. And the nations that came of the two brothers, the two twin brothers, resided next door to each other for the entire time that Israel occupied the Promised Land. Edom was always right next door and shared a border. And there was always the same tension between the nations as there was between the brothers, with a great deal of jealousy. Now, it's recounted, I have to look at my notes. It's recounted in both 2 Kings 8 and 2 Chronicles 21, the occasion on which that Jehoram, the king of Judah, the southern kingdom, during the time of Ahab in the northern kingdom of Israel, the southern kingdom of Judah, Jehoram, the son of Jehoshaphat, that the Philistines and the Arabs came in and attacked Jerusalem and ended up sacking it and taking off the king's possessions as well as his children, with the exception of Ahaziah. Now, as they did this, Edom stood by and watched and even partook in the sacking of the spoiling of Jerusalem. Now, if we fast forward a few hundred years, when King Nebuchadnezzar defeated Jerusalem and tore down its walls, the next door neighbors, Edom, took great advantage of that, and they pillaged Jerusalem, as well as they killed and otherwise abused the refugees from Nebuchadnezzar's conquest. And so these are the events that the prophet will speak to, both the negligence and glee that Edom felt when Jehoram's Jerusalem was sacked, as well as the glee and the abuse that Edom heaped upon Judah at the time of its exile and defeat at the hands of Nebuchadnezzar. So that's kind of the backstory with the prophecy of Edom, against Edom, the prophecy of Obadiah. Now, that's the backstory. So let's talk a little bit about the history of Edom. When the two brothers, Jacob and Esau, parted, they were both under the obeisance to the God of Abraham. And the God of Abraham continued to be worshipped by both brothers and both nations, Israel under the covenant, and Esau under a tradition that evolved on its own. The god of Edom went by the name of Cuz and had many of the attributes of Yahweh or Jehovah. It continued to be the God of Abraham. And for some 600 years before God revealed himself to Moses as the Tetragrammaton, as the Lord in all capital letters, represented by the Hebrew letters Yod, He, Vav, He, Jehovah, Yahweh. Before God made himself known to Moses by that name, Cuz had been worshipped by Edom, by that nation. Now, over the years, just like with the Yahweh, they had given him a wife, Asherah, and that was the idolatry of both the Israelites as well as the Edomites. Now, we notice in the Old Testament that the gods of the surrounding nations, Dagon of the Philistines, Chemosh of Moab, and Molech of Ammon, are all vilified in the Old Testament. Nowhere in our Bible do we see the god of the god of Edom referred to by name. There are a few theophoric names in the Old Testament that are an acknowledgement that he existed, but you notice that he is not vilified. He is not singled out for commentary in the Old Testament because he does, in fact, represent the God of Abraham by a different name and by a different tradition. So in the prophecy of Obadiah being an Edomite by tradition, and we know his background as a lifelong worshiper of Yahweh, and we see that in his interaction with Ezekiel, has observed Moab, I keep wanting to call it Moabites, Edomites had observed Edom's complacency and glee in the misfortunes of Judah, and God sends him a vision to prophesy against them. Now, it's the shortest book in the Old Testament. It's only 21 short verses. And so I'm going to change resources. And we will read from the prophecy to see what it is that he says. And we won't be able to go through every prophet of the Old Testament in this kind of detail, because for obvious reasons, but since this is such a short prophecy, and it's recapitulated to a large degree by the prophet Jeremiah hundreds of years later, I think it is important that we understand what it is that Obadiah is saying, and then take a look at how is it fulfilled. Because it's like all the Old Testament prophecy, it has an immediate application that can be interpreted at the time it's written, and future implications, often layers of future implications of fulfillment, some of which may actually lie in our future. So let's look at the prophecy of Obadiah. It says, the vision of Obadiah. This is what the sovereign Lord says about Edom. We've heard a message from the Lord. An envoy was sent to the nations to say, rise, let us go against her for battle. He's prophesying that the nations of the world will align themselves against Edom. It says, see, I will make you small among the nations. You will be utterly despised. The pride of your heart has deceived you, you who live in the clefts of the rocks and make your home on the heights. You who say to yourself, who can bring me down to the ground? Though you soar like the eagle and make your nest among the stars, from there I will bring you down, declares the Lord. If thieves came to you, if robbers in the night, oh, what a disaster awaits you. Would they not steal only as much as they wanted? If grape pickers came to you, would they not leave a few grapes? But how Esau will be ransacked, his hidden treasures pillaged. All your allies will force you to the border. Your friends will deceive and overpower you. Those who eat your bread will set a trap for you, but you will not detect it. In that day, declares the Lord, I will not destroy the wise. Will I not destroy the wise men of Edom, those of understanding in the mountains of Esau? Your warriors, Timon, will be terrified, and everyone in Esau's mountains will be cut down in the slaughter. Because of the violence against your brother Jacob, you will be covered with shame. You will be destroyed forever. On the day you stood aloof while strangers carried off his wealth and foreigners entered his gates and cast lots for Jerusalem, you were like one of them. You should not gloat over your brother in the day of his misfortune, nor rejoice over the people of Judah in the day of their destruction, nor boast so much in the day of their trouble. You should not march through the gates of my people in the day of their disaster, nor gloat over them in their calamity in the day of their disaster, nor seize their wealth in the day of their disaster. You should not wait at the crossroads to cut down their fugitives, nor hand over their survivors in the day of their trouble. The day of the Lord is near for all nations. As you have done, it will be done to you. Your deeds will return upon your own head, just as you drank on my holy hill, so all the nations will drink continually. They will drink and be as if they had never been. But on Mount Zion will be deliverance. It will be holy, and Jacob will possess his inheritance, and Jacob will be a fire, and Joseph a flame. Esau will be stubble, and they will set him on fire and destroy him. There will be no survivors from Esau. The Lord has spoken. The people from the Negev will occupy the mountains of Esau, and the people from the foothills will possess the lands of the Philistines. They will occupy the fields of Ephraim and Samaria, and Benjamin will possess Gilead. This company of Israelite exiles who are in Canaan will possess the land as far as Zarephath. The exiles from Jerusalem who are in Sepharad, or Spain, will possess the towns of the Negev. Deliverers will go up on Mount Zion to govern the mountains of Esau, and the kingdom will be the Lord's. Now, it's a terrible prophecy against the descendants of Esau, against Edom. Now, the first prophecy about Jacob and Esau was that the older would serve the younger. And of course, all through their histories, Israel has dominated Edom. So how is the prophecy fulfilled? And why do I place Obadiah as the very earliest of the written prophets of the Old Testament? Well, all through Edom's history, they were dominated, at first by the nation of Israel, the United Kingdom under David. Next, they were dominated always by Judah, with which they shared a border on the south side of the land of Judah. And even through the entirety of their history, they were conquered repeatedly by the Hebrew nation. Late in their history, when the return of the exiles from Babylon, we see the events of Hellenistic Palestine. And we read the Bible story, if you read in the book of Maccabees, the story of the Maccabean Civil War and the exploits of what came to be known as the Hasmonean dynasty, the Hasmonean rulers of Judah leading up to the time of the Roman conquest in 62 BC and the subsequent domination of Rome in the time of Jesus. The line of kings, the Hasmonean kings that ended with the Herodians, there was late in around 120 BC, there was the Hasmonean ruler John Hyrcanus, who finally defeated Edom and annexed it into Judah and forced the conversion of all the Edomites to Judaism. And this is where Edom, at that time known by its Greek name, Idumea, became indistinguishable from the Jewish nation. It lost its national identity, except for the area in which they lived. They became indistinguishable from their Jewish brothers. Their final destruction came about in the Roman destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. Of course, as Jewish converts, these children of Abraham sided with the Jews in the Jewish-Roman wars. And as of 70 AD, with the destruction of Jerusalem and the destruction of the temple, we hear nothing more about a national identity for the people of Edom. They're gone, they're erased from history. Now, there are some Talmudic references and some instances of Kabbalah where they're identified with Rome and then with the larger European population. But those things are not historical. Those things are Kabbalistic and they're speculations, but there is no identifiable people of Edom. This prophecy was entirely fulfilled. Now, there's a larger fulfillment of this prophecy, and that is yet to come when Christ and his church rule the nations of the earth, when Christ takes possession of his inheritance, the nations of the earth, and rule all the nations with an iron scepter. Edom is used figuratively to represent all the nations, all the Gentile nations of the world. And Christ will rule and reign over this earth and its nations as his inheritance. And we are joint heirs. His church is with him when that happens. It's a glorious prophecy. Now, it's a tragic prophecy for Edom. And the tragedy that began with Esau continued itself until 70 AD, when finally the descendants of Esau were exterminated and what few left were scattered anonymously into the world. While a remnant of Israel remains, Edom is no more. It's an amazing prophecy. I hope that you now understand, if you didn't before, the nature of the prophet as well as his vision and the fulfillment of his prophecy. Because the word of the Lord through his servant the prophet is sure. It will come to pass. We will pick up again next week with another of the Old Testament prophets, an overview, and we'll get into as many details as we can with the time allotted. But our purpose is here to give you an introduction to the prophets of the Old Testament and understand some of those books that maybe you haven't paid a lot of attention to, but turn out to be fascinating and very important to our understanding of Christ's mission on earth. Until next week.